Hello, peoples. Um, so today I actually want to have a very difficult um, video. I want to talk about suicide. Um, I'm going to try. I may decide that this is too soon for me to discuss. I want to talk about my own experience with suicide and how it's affected me in my life, between people that I've lost to it and my own attempts in the past and my own suicidal ideation and depression over the years. I might stick more just to the actual suicide and save depression for another conversation. They are tied in together, so I may tangent a bit. Um, I'm going to start off by saying, I don't even know what I'm going to start off saying. Okay, so I've been very deeply affected by suicide. I have lost a lot of people that I've known directly and indirectly. To clarify, um, someone did, when I say that I've lost so many of my friends from the cult from my childhood, from the cult to suicide, I'm not exaggerating. Some of them I knew personally, others I knew their family personally, maybe not them, but, and then because we were such a small community, I think our biggest size we ever were was about 20,000 at one time. Um, so that's a fairly small number still of people. And so we all were interconnected, that were part of this community, so whether we knew them directly or not, we still knew them and they were still, indirectly, we share similar stories and a similar upbringing. And so, um, this last week, not that suicide's ever not on my mind because I lost my partner to suicide, but recently, um, someone is trying to make a tally so that we can properly honor and all the ones that we've lost to the cult, specifically to suicide. And an ex-member once did a tally, just a rough tally. It's not like some super official statistical analysis, but just a rough tally. Um, and based on her estimate, our average rate for suicide when compared to the same age group in the United States is approximately 30% higher than the national average. Um, Now, again, that's not a perfect percentage, but it's still a very dramatically high percentage. And I understand why. Um, it is so common that when I hear that one of my friends from childhood has died, or my friend's friend, or, whatever, whenever I hear that a cult kid has died, I default to suicide. I have been trying to not smoke when I do these just because a kid could watch and it is bad, but I've said before, when I get anxious or when I'm feeling a kind of way, cigarettes help relax me, so apologies. I'm gonna smoke and swear like a motherfucker in this one. So, I'm gonna talk. That is a substantial thing, and in the last couple days, we've been sharing names of people that we've lost to the cult by suicide. And in the course of a couple days, the number is quite high, and including people I directly knew, like my brother, who passed last year to suicide. Um, and a lot of names of people that I know directly and others that indirectly I know. So it's been kind of heavy on my heart, so to speak. When I was a child, I talked before about my allergic reaction where when I was seven, I think I was seven, um, and I felt very unseen. Um, Partially, large family syndrome, but also one of many children in our commune. And I didn't want to die at the time. I was seven. But I did have an attempt. Now, I did think I might be successful and I might die, and so I was okay with that. But as a child, I didn't really comprehend that death is like permanent. But I thought maybe if I died, finally people would care. And I was angry and I was also a child. I'm pretty sure I grabbed like just a normal, not a butter knife, but like a normal knife from like your regular utensils, so not a sharp knife, as best as I can recall. And I tried to cut my wrists. Um, it wasn't sharp, and I ended up just bruising. And I cut sideways, both wrists. And I remember trying to like saw and push, and I never broke skin. I think I scratched myself a little bit and I bruised myself. And I got very frustrated that the knife was not sharp and I gave up. Um, and I don't remember anyone asking me if I was okay, if I had tried to self harm, because that's all I wanted. I wanted someone to care. I hear often, fuck, I hear often in people talking about suicidal, mentally ill people that they're just looking for attention and they're not actually wanting to die. And that is sometimes the case. But just because they're not actually trying to die doesn't mean that they can't be successful at causing their own death. Success seems the wrong term to use. But yeah, so that was my first attempt. I made another attempt when I was 13. I don't, it was a similar situation where I just didn't feel cared for. Again, growing up in this cult, I mean, there were people who cared, but there were a lot who didn't. And there were a lot, I mean, most of us, myself included, were brainwashed to. And, it, like, they would only care if you died because it's one less person to preach their gospel, whatever. So it wasn't about the individual, it was about the cause. So, yeah, we weren't important as individuals, and we knew it. And when I was 13, I made another attempt. This time I thought I was going to do it right. I got the biggest knife we had. It was the sharpest. And it still was dull as fuck. It was a big serrated knife. I think maybe a bread knife, which in hindsight, probably not the right choice either. Um, Clearly, I was not successful at that attempt either, but that time I did manage to break skin, but only enough for like small superficial scratches, and I had like welts. And this time I tried very hard. I was literally sawing through, and I went the same direction that time also. I was literally trying to saw through, but that was did not work. Um, and so I had like blood, like little stripes with blood and like welts that look like bad scratches. And I had about an inch and a half thick bruising across both my wrists. And again, I don't recollect anybody asking if I had tried to harm myself, if I was okay, if anything had gone wrong. I think maybe one of the adults rinsed my wrists off and acted like I'd just fallen out of a tree. Um, I mentioned this to some of my family, and both times they were like, "How did I not see it?" And I'm like, "You were a small child. What would you have thought it was?" Suicide was not something that we discussed. Suicide was, bad and evil, and we just didn't talk about it. And like, you had no idea what to compare it to. So if a child or a young teenager in this environment would have seen it, they wouldn't know what they were looking at. But these adults, they came from the real world. They should have known. If I saw a child that had some very interesting scrapes or bruises across both wrists, I think I would ask them if they are all right and if maybe they tried to harm themselves. I think that would be the right takeaway, that maybe something happened here and maybe I should talk to them and maybe they're not safe from themselves. And that didn't happen, because if it did, I would have remembered that, because that's what I wanted. I wanted someone to care. And I realized that it just, they didn't care. Yeah. And so I decided, I don't know, after that, life went on. But depression is something I've dealt with my whole life. And when I left, for so many years, when the first big waves of us were leaving, I would hear all the time about suicides from the cult. All the time. It has become my default assumption when I hear one of us has passed on, that it was likely suicide unless I'm told otherwise. And we have lost some to natural causes and accidents and illness and things like that too. But the majority is suicide. It is that prevalent in our cult culture, I guess, the survivors. And it is hard to adjust to a world that you were not raised to live in. It is hard to know that your entire childhood was a lie and you don't have the right coping mechanisms to survive in this world. It's hard to move to your real country that you're a citizen of, for me, the United States, and feel like an outsider because I wasn't born here. I wasn't raised here. I don't know pop culture references because I didn't grow up with TV and music like everyone else. I feel like I'm constantly playing catch up. Um, I really looked into suicide very, very closely because at this point I just accepted it as fact that this was just normal for us. And if we hadn't died by suicide, we were just lucky at this point. But then I lost my cousin to suicide 6 years ago. That one hit me hard because he was an amazing person. He was the first of my relatives that really made me feel like family. He was just a few months younger than me. And so I was closest to him out of everyone. And he had, while not a perfect life, he had a life that I wished I could have had, because it was still better than mine, at least from my perspective. It's possible that he had mental illness that was untreated, and I don't know all the details. because he became a bit of a recluse in the last couple years. We didn't communicate as much, and I'll always regret losing touch. But his death just didn't make sense to me. Way more so than the cult kids. Like that, it made sense. I understood why they gave up, or why they sought an out, or why they were tired of this world. I understood that because I've been overwhelmed in the same way myself. So I understood that. But with my cousin, it was a really hard one to understand. He was such an amazing person. He was so intelligent. He was special. And I went in a deep dive on the internet, and I went to some pretty dark places trying to understand. And I read just forum after forum of people who were experiencing suicidal ideation and or were planning their death. Some of them were very meticulous about it, and it opened my eyes to just how helpless some people really feel. And I know people say it's selfish, and it's okay to feel that way. But through all these forums and everything I read from people who were planning their deaths, the number one thing they were worried about was their family and their friends, their loved ones. They thought that leaving was the best thing for their family. They were wrong. But when your brain is lying to you, it can really fuck with your head, for real. I mean, for real. And this is a really hard, there's so many ums and ahs. I wish I knew how to edit so y'all don't have to get all this. This is just a really hard video to make, and I may pause if I break down too much. So I felt like I had a much clearer understanding about suicide. And then last year, my brother died to suicide. He was another victim of the cult. He was born and raised into it, and he left and was working on making a life for himself. And right at the beginning of shutdown with COVID, that's when he died. And right around the same time is when Jordan made his first attempt last year. I don't think Jordan was trying to die at the time, but he did make an attempt right around the time my brother tried. And losing my brother was devastating. He and I were not close per se. I only met him a few times when he was an infant, but we had reconnected on Facebook and Messenger, and we were talking, and I think I was the one he talked to the most here in the US of his US family, because I was the one that they contacted, and it was on me to let my sisters and our dad know, which was a big responsibility. And I was in such shock over losing him. We kept talking about, meeting up one of the times that he flew into the States, and it just never happened, and now it never will. And that was really hard. And then 2 months later, I lost Jordan. And fuck, I'm not going to talk about that one. Not yet. But but after losing Jordan, I'm going to have a sip of my coffee. I need a minute. After losing Jordan, I spiraled. I broke. Any resilience that I had over the years, I lost. And everyone told me I was very strong. I wasn't. But my heart kept beating and my lungs kept filling with air. So I'm still here. That's the only reason. For a full 10 months, every single day, I woke up disappointed that I was still here. I fantasized about ways that I could cease to exist in this world. And I'd like to say my friends and my family, my son, and my loved ones are the reason I'm still here. And they are. But weirdly, the one person that I absolutely could not leave was my dog. My dog is a rescue, and for some reason, she decided that I'm her best, favoriteest person in the world. And she's had to adjust to so much trauma and is so supremely content when she's near me that I'm her main bitch. And so my son has a partner. My family has their loved ones. They have people they can rely on. Little lady just has me. Not that my son wouldn't take over and take care of her if anything did happen to me, but it wouldn't be the same for her. And so, yeah. That sounds selfish, I know. But I was so distraught. And the depression came in. It was already setting in before he had passed. COVID and lockdown was a whole other story for another day. But yeah, she was someone who needed me more than she needed anyone else. And so I stayed. And I do take antidepressants now. For myself, I have found weed to be helpful. And I find psychedelics to also be helpful. I will talk about those in another episode. But there are studies that show that they can be helpful with PTSD, severe trauma, and severe depression, provided you don't have certain mental illnesses that can cause you to go manic. So don't take my word and go out and try stuff and harm yourself. There are things that can be very dangerous about it. But that is what's helped me, that and my family and my son and support groups and my dog and finding my widow support group. That has been what's helped me. But I was barely holding on for a really long time. I don't consider myself completely out of the woods. But at least I'm okay when I wake up in the morning. Well, I'm not always okay. but I don't hate that I still happen to be alive. And so that's an improvement. My doctor put it this way, that depression and mental illness can kill, but it doesn't have to. It doesn't always kill. It is survivable. And it is very real. And when someone chooses to take their life, they're not doing it to you. They're doing it to try to save themselves from whatever pain and severe hurt that they're in. At least typically, if there is such a thing as typical. But this is something I've learned in my experience with suicide and losing people very close to me. And it's such a shame that mental illness is not more freely discussed, and that there's still so many misconceptions about suicide. It needs to stop being a taboo subject. It is uncomfortable to talk about. It is. But it could save someone's life. And for myself, my sister, when I told her, she got very upset because she doesn't want to lose me, understandably. And she's like, you can't do that to me. You can't do that to your son. You can't do that. And I was like, what about me? So I should live so everyone else can pat themselves on the back. I'm hurting. And I don't want to hurt like this anymore. When you're hurting, yeah, it might literally be all in your head. But it's a pain that if you haven't experienced it, you will never understand. Your brain is an organ and it can malfunction like anything else. Like my eyesight is bad. I wear glasses. My brain is malfunctioning, so I take antidepressants. It is okay to get help. You're not broken. Your brain is just needs a little help. And it's okay to talk to someone, and it's okay to get medical help. It's okay. There's a 800 number for suicide. If I knew how to edit, I would flash it across the screen. I don't know how to do that. And for me, what I found the most comforting was not people telling me all the reasons I had to live, because I couldn't see them when I wanted to die. I couldn't see the sun shining made me mad, because it should be in mourning because Jordan was gone. People smiling and laughing made me mad because they didn't know that an amazing person was gone from this world. People tell you that things get better, but when you're that low and you're in this deep, deep, dark well, so deep down, you can't see how it's going to improve. And it might not get better, not for a very long time, or it might get better and then get bad again. We really don't know. That's the way life goes. What I have learned since I have stayed is that I'm still not sure that life actually does get better. Right now, things are going quite well, but clearly I still am very emotional and still am battling with depression. But I do know that life is different now. I'm not sure if that's a good or a bad thing. But it's different, and I've adjusted to carrying this sadness with me. I am becoming familiar with the pain, and I'm learning how to carry it. It's just going to be a part of my existence for the rest of my life, and I'm learning how to shoulder it. And it's becoming less overwhelming because it's now familiar. And yes, I pronounce that funny, and all my friends that are out there wanting to point that out. Yes, familiar. There, I said it again. So this has already gone on long enough, and I've cried and look a hot mess. And but seriously, if anyone is feeling this way or has lost someone and you don't understand, I'm willing to discuss with you. I support is wonderful, and for me, what was best was not people telling me all the reasons I needed to keep living, because all those reasons seemed pointless at the time. What helped me was people saying that it was okay that I felt that bad, and that they were going to be here for me no matter what. Sometimes you just need someone to sit in the dark with you and know that you're not alone. So if you're feeling like that, just know you're not the only one. There are so many out there who feel the same. Find a community that can support you. Find your tribe. Find someone, because trust me, you're not alone in how you're feeling. You're just not. Others have been there before. Others are there now. Others will be there in the future. You're not alone, and you're not broken. Your brain is just having a moment, and maybe it needs a little care. And with that, I will say goodbye. Ciao.